Audio working?
Hey, I got a mic. You got a mic.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Looking at the wall.
Oh, I have to pray.
Oh,
I just noticed
do you want
that.
us to pray for your prayers?
Yes, please.
I'm going to do it.
Mac was up there messing with it.
I get this text from the bishop.
That's looking.
And you could just stay there, Trevor. Yes. See, that'd be beneficial.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, should we start? Want to welcome everybody to the South Weber City Council. Today is Tuesday, July the 12th, 2022, and it's 6:06 p.m. and we'll begin this meeting with a pledge by Councilwoman Alberts and the prayer by Councilman Halverson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Father in heaven, as we come before thee this evening, we're thankful for the opportunity to meet here as members of our community and to discuss the needs of South Weber City. We pray for thy spirit to be with us, that we may make proper decisions in the best interest of all those that are affected by our decisions. Father, we're thankful for our armed forces and our firefighters and all of our police and for all that they do for us. We ask you to watch over and protect them, that they may return to their families in safety. We're thankful for the country which we live in and the freedoms we have, and we say things in my Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We'll begin with public comments. So we'll open it up for public comments. If you've got one, please address us from the microphone in the back.
Paul Sturm, 2527 Deer Run Drive. Public comments on action item number 8, which is the ordinance to rezone approximately 7800 and 2700 East from commercial highway and agriculture to residential patio by applicant Phil Holland. My first is a general public comment. I'm confused about the South Weber City processes for rezone request. Should not a public hearing be held in front of the city council? I believe that this should be the case since this rezone action was forwarded by the Planning Commission to the City Council as a tie vote. Comment on the packet. The last paragraph of the City Council meeting staff report states that a potential site plan was provided in the request. Why was this potential site plan not included in the packet? Although as it stated, as not being a factor for consideration of a rezone, it has a great deal to do with the developer's intent and impacts to an existing business. My concerns about this rezone request were stated in my public comments during the Planning Commission meeting of 9 June 22. My basic concerns are restated and with some additions as a result of the Planning Commission meeting and are shown below. One of my stated concerns was the fact that the property's proposed rezone to PH puts it directly adjacent to Morty's Car Wash. If the city considers approving the construction of patio homes on this parcel in the future, the city will also need to address the numerous other issues discussed and agreed upon during the car wash approval process, particularly noise, lighting, and hours of operation. It appears that if the South Weber City Council approves this rezone, there will be an imminent conflict regarding elements of the pre-approved operation of Morty's Car Wash. 2, the major conflict I see concerns the noise ordinance that was passed during the 14 June 22 City Council meeting and the proposed patio homes proximity to the car wash. There will also be the obvious noise, lighting, and hours of operation issues that were previously addressed and approved by South Weber City. 3, one must also remember what was initially presented to the city by Dan Murray for the development of this entire parcel. This development included Morty's Car Wash to the north, which was the only development portion finally approved. To the south of the car wash, a set of light industrial buildings were proposed. These were intended to be a buffer between the car wash and proposed housing further south, which were adjacent to 7800 South. I do not believe it is fair to the car wash, since discussions were held during the Planning Commission meeting also indicated that any noise or light issues impacted the potential patio homes would potentially have to be mitigated by the car wash itself. The car wash was there first, and to legislate a change impacting the car wash after the fact is unconscionable. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else with comments? Okay, we'll move on to the next item, our consent agenda, consisting of June 14th minutes, June's check register, and May's budget to actual. Are there any discussions or items of concern with this consent agenda? If none, I'll look for a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Our next item, Transportation Capital Facilities Plan, 2700 East area concept. Dave, do you want to take this one?
I'm happy to do a little introduction and then I'll turn it over to more of the transportation experts. The process is that we are currently going through an update to the capital facilities plan for transportation. This is just as we have once the general plan is updated, we go through the series of capital facility plan updates. It's now transportation's turn. WCG has been involved in that and doing a really good job working with staff on some of those planning elements. And in order to better understand the future needs of the 2700 East South Weber Drive intersection and all of that interplay, as part of this transportation plan update, we asked for a specific study to be done on that. And so tonight is the chance for WCG, Brandon and Trevor, who've been working with them specifically on the planning elements there, to present what they've come up with as an option, a concept that potentially could be included in the capital facilities plan that would allow us to then move forward in the impact fee facilities plan and impact fee analysis. And it's basically a planning document that would allow us to collect impact fees and also direct the development of that area. For example, when the east side of 2700 East develops, to have something like this, even at the high conceptual level, not the final design in any way, have something like that, we then could have very specific conversations with the property owners and developers about what land would need to become road and what land would remain, and that type of a discussion. So this is a planning and budgeting conversation more than the specifics of the details of the plan. But a traffic study was done, and this is a proposal to help handle the future traffic. The timeline for this proposal, there is no specific timeline for its construction, but the timeline for the plan is out to 2050 as far as the build out in the city. This is not an immediate plan that we would be looking to design and engineer and go out and construct in the near future. So with that, I'll hand it over to Brandon. And
If you want to go ahead and stand up there so that you've got a mic. So this is Paul Peterson with WCG. He is here to respond to any of the direct engineering type questions related to this concept plan. I don't need to restate what David's already stated. This is generally a guidance document. We need to have, the more detail we have, the better, we can have a cost estimate that will go into the forming of impact fees, and making sure that when development occurs that we give good guidance so we aren't redoing anything, which is always the goal. So I guess I'm gonna open it up to the council. We're looking for specific feedback. In the memo, the staff memo listed some of the main elements, the number of lanes, the proposed roundabout at 7800, and some improvements on South Weaver Drive. We need to know if you're feeling comfortable with those, and if you're not, if we can discuss why those were shown as the need. So
maybe I can give you a question, but I'm going to preface that with a little bit of a statement. So the Municipal Utilities Committee had a chance to go through this, and Haley can jump in.
That would be public safety,
Or,
but yeah.
sorry, Public Safety Committee, sorry. We went through this, and there's also aspects that some of us liked, some of us didn't like. But the biggest thing that keeps coming up, and when we all had an email today from it, is roundabout. Now, my personal opinion of roundabouts is not very positive, but can you give us from your engineering standpoint, why we would need a roundabout there eventually? And I think I know why it's there, and I have some answers, but I'd rather hear it from you than from me.
Great. So roundabouts in general are always going to be safer at an intersection. And the main reason is because it reduces the amount of conflict points. If you're going through the intersection or turning left or turning right, there's a lot of conflict points. As you go through a roundabout, if they're designed properly, I think that's the big key. A lot of them aren't designed properly. So if it's designed properly, the intent is to slow vehicles down as they enter the intersection, and they have one conflict point as they enter the intersection. So they're basically looking to the left to merge into traffic. The reason we proposed it here is because we're recommending to eliminate the left turns out of the Maverick along 2700 East. The reason we're doing that is because the traffic in the future will back up at the signalized intersection, and they'll have a hard time getting out. So if they were to turn right, they would have nowhere to go. So placing a roundabout there helps them turn right out of the Maverick, head south around the roundabout, and then come north to access South Weaver Drive. It just provides a better circulation through that area. I mean, those are the two main reasons we proposed it here.
Thank
You're
you.
saying the roundabout is more for trucks that are trying, or cars and trucks coming out of Maverick, coming out of Morty's, that can't make the turn because we've already got traffic backing up, and then they could go around the roundabout to come back down.
And we're putting a median. This is long-term. Long-term, there would
Yeah,
possibly be the cement median in the middle that they couldn't make that left-hand turn. But
You mentioned trucks. It's not necessarily trucks, but all traffic, passenger cars as well. It helps them circulate better.
So that's with the median up there, cutting that, okay.
It also provides, the east leg provides access into what we're anticipating as some type of commercial development there on that whole east triangle. Eliminating another access point, just kind of combining it all into one.
So I guess this is a question more for staff or council. So on the impact fees on this, all of it would be paid by the developers coming in? Or would part of it still be coming to the city?
Not, it wouldn't be all, probably. That's part of what WCG will do is calculate how much is required due to future development, how much is based on what's currently there. And I don't know exactly what that would be. They'll determine what that is, and the dollar figure will drop out of the bottom, whatever that is. You should, as a general rule, try to make sure that you're including every element that you do anticipate in the future so that developers are paying their full way.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't want to speak for Haley, but out of the committee meeting, we basically decided there were elements we liked, didn't like, but this is what is, I don't want to say worst case scenario. This is what we would, every element we still have to approve and do later on, 2050. But I mean, it at least gives you your full impact fees and you're not shortchanging the city by those impact fees. If you take elements out of this, then they're not calculated in those impact fees.
So if we would have had this 2 years ago, when Morty's came in, they would have been paying
A
part of
different
this
impact
as
fee.
their impact fees.
Yeah, Morty still paid a pretty good chunk of change for their impact based on the current plan. But that now needs to be updated based on, as you know, we've adjusted things for South Bench Drive, right? It's no longer in there. That's got to come out. More detail on 2700 needs to go in. And so we just want to make sure we're capturing everything as best as we can foresee the future of what we'll need here, so that you don't, shortchange yourself. Because if you did not include, a roundabout is going to be more expensive than just leaving the intersection as is, right?
Yeah.
So,
By about how much?
oh boy, I don't know.
That much.
I'd say it's quite a bit more.
Yeah, I think it would be quite a bit more. It provides additional things that a traditional intersection wouldn't, right? So yeah, it would be more expensive. So if in the future let's say you didn't include it, and then in the future you decided, you know what, we really do think that's going to be a better thing, you're deficient in what you've been collecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if we vote for it, then we can't go back and say, you know what, thanks for paying all of that, but we're not going to do the roundabout now, right?
Well, impact fee plans and analyses are dynamic. So there's always some element that you were collecting for something here that then got changed in a future plan. Something got added, something got removed. So
To
I don't know, maybe
to that
Paul
point,
has-
when a developer pays their impact fee,
Mhm.
they're not paying to a specific project.
right.
They're paying to their impact to the transportation or other impact fees on the whole. And so that plays to that dynamic
So
element.
the overall concept could change or be tweaked or,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, Haley really doesn't like cement medians. That may be something that's negotiated for something totally different. And so, but that's 20 years down the road, 5 years down the road, who knows what that is.
Okay.
One thing that I think is important to point out is I'm not the one sitting there, and you're not the one as council sitting there looking at the traffic study and looking at the numbers and things like that. But we do have traffic engineers that are looking at those future projections. And then based on those numbers are looking at what traffic devices accommodate those numbers. It's not, hey, I love roundabouts. Let's put it in there because those are just so much fun. It's what traffic numbers are dictating traffic types of devices. And that was how this whole plan kind of came to fruition. And so maybe speak to the process a little bit and what were some of the most priority type elements in the intersection plan and how that dominoed to other elements.
Paul, sorry, I just want to, it says in the memo, but I want to point out that the general guiding principles that were given to WCG was to minimize congestion and maximize safety in this area. We have, a large number of residential homes that funnel to 2700, right? They come off of 7800 and then they come down 2700 to where the proposed roundabout would be. Well, with a roundabout, that would allow for much better circulation of the traffic getting in and out of the city versus, people that come down and are waiting at 7800 and 2700 is just so busy that makes it really difficult to make a left-hand turn. Well, they don't have to worry about that necessarily with the roundabout. So the residents are the ones that we're kind of focusing on here to make sure they're able to get in and out of the city through this area without it just being a headache and a nightmare, but still allowing for the commercial element to thrive. So trying to find that balance, I think is what we were trying to go for. So I don't know,
Yeah.
Paul, anything else?
No, that was good. The roundabout too, this is a unique area because you're at the end of the commercial district and then you get into residential. So it's also an opportunity to have kind of a cutoff area. You could put a signal here based on the volumes, but it just made sense. Sometimes just the way the traffic is coming in and how busy each leg is. Other than getting into, a lot of the details on numbers, this just balanced out to where a roundabout functions very well here. The delays are less. Residents won't be waiting as much on a roundabout. They'll slow down, merge in, and then go on their way. Where if there's a signal here, there could be the potential for quite a few delays, especially on 7800 South as they try to access 2700 West.
Would we have to worry about a no turn on red sign?
That's a loaded question.
That's
Be
a
careful.
joke.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
He's kidding.
I think when you're looking at it, when we do the initial stacking, some of the major first issues that were identified in a traffic study were needing a double left-hand turn onto 2700 from South Weaver Drive coming from 84 or 89. That was one of the initial items. Also, a dedicated right turn lane onto South Weaver Drive from 2700 were two kind of the major items. So when you create a double left-hand turn into an area, then you need two lanes to receive that right, and it's like you give a mouse a cookie, and it's like, oh, now we have to worry about a raised median because we have to worry about left-hand turn traffic because we're going to have stacking on this side, and so I would just say that roundabout wasn't the first solution presented. It was, okay, we need to solve this left-hand turn problem, and then as that begins, you start seeing, okay, that's going to cause these traffic stacking issues. So it was just kind of this is the full scope. If we did all of the changes, this is most likely what we would need to do.
So going back to the roundabout still, I don't want to leave that one yet. Is that the smallest radius that we can do? Or is that determined by speed?
So it's mostly determined on the vehicle that needs to navigate the roundabout. We assume that there'd be commercial on the east side, so that trucks would need to come down and at some point go around that roundabout. So we assumed a WB67, if that means anything to anybody. It's like a Walmart truck. Could come down, make that turn, using we have a raised median, mountable curb that they can drive up on for the occasional truck. So to answer your question, yes,
Not if we wanted to.
that's about as small as we could probably get it realistically.
But it is also showing like dedicated right-hand turn lane onto 7800. And so there's probably some things that could be revised a little bit to make it a little bit smaller if we feel like that's wise, or that, that's really what we're after. Again, right, this is a concept plan, so that the idea is, are you in favor of going with the roundabout as the plan for now, or do you want to remove that?
Well, but I guess it goes back for me, seeing the part of the roundabouts that cut through the brown, which is people's properties.
And don't get too focused on exactly where this shows. It can certainly be reconfigured a little bit to have less impact on existing properties, to some degree, right? I mean, there's still some that may impact there, but I foresee that it could be shifted a little bit farther to the north and to the east a little bit, so that it is trying to impact those as little as possible. Again, that would be down the road quite a few years before something like this would be needed, but at least as far as we can anticipate. But if you feel like this is a good way to plan.
Right, I'm just trying to understand all of the components
Yes,
of it first.
yeah, yes.
So like on the circle up at the top of that same page where you did the graphic, now it shows two entrances into the proposed commercial. Well, one, it shows two of them on there, but one would be going into that commercial area over there. I'm just thinking, and I'm not a big fan of it, Riverdale turning into Walmart, they have that first turn, which is trucks only, and everybody else takes it. Is that something that we could do? Or is that something that, because it's a headache for me, I would assume it's going to be a headache for everyone and not meet the safety criteria that you were talking about? Do you see where I'm talking about? DT03 on page 87.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you mean have trucks turn in there instead of go through the roundabout?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what those roads are for then, if it's not going to be part of the roundabout. It looks like it's a direct entrance without a median to get you right into the commercial area.
Yeah, they are. That could be an option. I think you'd still design for a truck to go straight through the roundabout, and that would help. You could make the roundabout smaller. When a truck needs to make a left turn, they take up a lot more room, so.
So it's funny you brought that up because I was thinking that same intersection and I feel like a roundabout completely absolves that problem that Riverdale has. That's the worst, getting out of Home Depot and between there and Walmart, you can't turn left and all that traffic would be backed up on the 7800 South.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So
That's why I
the roundabout
mentioned
makes
those
sense to
roundabouts,
me to plan for that.
And maybe like the east leg ends up not going in and you just have 3 legs. I mean, so exactly what it ends up becoming is going to be driven quite a bit by what is proposed there on that east side. But we really want to make sure that the residential traffic can get in and out of here without just feeling like this was poorly planned.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions or concerns that I have in looking at this. I can see the round, and I kind of like the roundabout. It is, I think, a effective way of moving traffic in and out. And it'll slow the people coming down the hill because there's some people that keep going a pretty good clip coming down that hill. Definitely we'll do that. What I don't like is the concrete center barrier down by the Maverick and by the car wash. I think that by putting that in and we're forcing now more commercial up into our residential area, which our residents are not going to like, to take that roundabout and come back out of there. I don't like that at all. I think that we should maybe look at some other options, if there are other options, before we would go putting that center barrier in.
And that's a fair point, Mayor. The the median itself would not be very costly. So what I'm really trying to make sure we're capturing is elements that are costly, that we're including those. If it ended up that the median didn't go in and you just want to try to allow for left-hand turns out of Maverick there, just see how it goes. You know, you could
Always
certainly,
add it in.
you can certainly do that. And then if you felt like it's getting to the point where, you know, there's enough accidents that it necessitates something like that, you could. And I'd also point out that the traffic can also go out the north access of Maverick and just turn right. So they wouldn't have to go right down around the roundabout and back. You could just go out the other way.
Can I ask a question about that? So I agree with you, Mayor. I do not like that. I feel like all those big trucks are coming in, they fill up on the diesel side, they go out, now they're gonna go right and through a roundabout and out. I just think there are times that a median helps during certain times of the day, but then that's like a small portion of the day. And then most of the time you can get to that intersection just fine. So I lived in Riverdale when they redid all of Riverdale Road, and the council at the time really pushed back on having any medians there at all, which Riverdale Road has none. And I feel it's the same. There are times there's no way you're going to get across Riverdale Road, right? But then there's a lot of other times that you can just fine. But if there's a median there, then you can't. There's only one way to go. So my question is if that isn't a right only out of Maverick, do we need the roundabout? If you're not forcing all the traffic to go up by 7800, do you need a roundabout still?
I think when we get the lots in there, yeah, we probably.
Well, and any, like they said, it's driven by development, but if there's development on the east side. and that's
I just would like to hear
commercial.
from him, based on how, the fact that you're pushing Maverick traffic to go south. Is that a significant amount of traffic that's requiring the roundabout, or is the roundabout needed no matter what you do with that?
So the roundabout, you know, it's used for the east side traffic for access. I need to look at the volumes again, but I don't think it's a significant amount that we're pushing through the roundabout from.
Okay.
Maverick.
And if we don't do a roundabout, then we're probably looking at a light in an intersection, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
with, I think if there's a light, people would probably go down into the residential areas a lot more and meander through and try and find a way to turn around.
I'm not saying I'm against it. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that I understand our options, that if you don't do a roundabout, then you're looking at a light.
So roundabout provides a definite turnaround point for anybody in this commercial district to keep them from going down into the residential. So
Okay.
Haley, are you suggesting that if you pull the center median, that you potentially could also pull a roundabout? Are you tying those
I was
together?
just wondering if it required that much more traffic, because we're directing the traffic that way. But it sounds like it's not going to be a very significant amount. I know that we've had, comments coming in about how they don't want a roundabout in that area. But we need to consider, if it's not a roundabout, then it's a light. So that needs to be a consideration for the residents that are against the roundabout.
It sounds to me like, and speak to this if I'm missing the point, but whether or not you have the raised median is kind of irrelevant and a separate issue than whether you have a roundabout or a signalized intersection.
So the raised median, if you keep the raised median, it provides an opportunity for Maverick people to turn out and then get back to South Weaver.
It's much easier turnaround
Yeah,
in a roundabout and a raised median. But
correct.
if there's no raised median, you could end up with a roundabout or a signalized intersection. Potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Is it safe to say, Paul, that the raised median is a safety thing?
Yeah.
It's not driven by traffic counts necessarily. The number of traffic counts increase safety risks, right? So you put in the raised median to try to lower those back down.
Well, it's kind of like you pointed out earlier. We're talking about today, traffic today, and it may not seem like a big issue, but we're talking about 2050 traffic when all of this develops. then making a left turn out of there could be pretty problematic to, especially during peak hours. So, we're looking at 2050 traffic. What's the safest way to get people through there? What's the most efficient way to get people through there?
And it's
And I
not,
would hope so, because that would mean we'd have a big commercial development there that's very vibrant and alive and working.
right.
I like roundabouts, I do, I'm sorry. I just don't like it when or private property has to be taken out for it. And that's really the only issue that I keep seeing down here with it. That's why the median is kind of such a big deal, is I think that would lower the amount of traffic that would be going up and flipping around. Because residential wise, going further south, we don't have pretty much anything up there to be developed anymore. I mean, that's done. That's a set number. So really the only thing we're looking at is the incoming commercial.
I would say the only caveat to no additional residential is that internal accessory dwelling units are allowed within the city. And this being a 2050 plan could see an increase in residential units inside already established residential areas. So that's just something to consider.
And those traffic counts are not in this study.
Okay.
We're not assuming any additional beyond what's already there as far as, no ADUs added in here. But to Trevor's point, that could increase the traffic potentially.
I know this was brought up during our committee meeting, but what was our current service level of this intersection in this first part of 20, wasn't it very low?
E,
I believe it is an E,
just the lowest.
which is
I
the
believe
lowest.
the future grade of that intersection was E, or essentially failed.
Currently like a D,
Well,
right?
what's our current service level?
I didn't bring the current, sorry. I have the future.
I thought it was a D,
I thought it was, you had
and
mentioned. it
our
being a
future
D.
was a C, or excuse me,
E.
a future was an E, but what do we try to maintain everywhere in the city?
C,
A C or better.
yeah.
So we're already below what our goal is as a city. And I think it's been brought up, several people have brought up to me, looking at this packet, about the double left-hand turn coming onto 2800. And if I understand reading your stuff correctly, that we're very close to needing that now.
Yeah.
How that gets backed up already without any future development, which then give a mouse a cookie, then you need the other two lanes. So some of this lower stuff could come sooner than later.
Yeah.
Well, and also keep in mind that even if your current residential doesn't increase, let's say, the traffic that's frequenting this area does increase, right? Assuming that we have a vibrant commercial district down there. And so just trying to get that through the gauntlet, so to speak, is what we're trying to do in the best way possible by thinking about it now, where some of this is yet to be written, so that, again, we don't wish that we had done things differently.
Yeah. Last thing I want to do is make it, I don't know what it's called. Remember where Fuddruckers was?
Yes.
That it's almost, there's been 6, 7 different restaurants that
Yeah,
have
you
tried
can't
it in
get
there.
there.
Can't get in there. It's such a hassle going in and out.
Right.
We won't even talk about the freeway stuff that they do up there, but that little area just has always, had to change out, because the traffic in and out pretty much stopped people from wanting to go in there all the time. So
Right.
I definitely don't want to do that, but yeah.
One
it's
element of this that
important.
hasn't been brought up yet, but we've talked about it, the idea of private property. And we're not looking to require any additional right-of-way more than we have to. But this idea of coming back and taking a second bite of the apple, the right-hand turn lane that is proposed on South Weber Drive to 2700 is that exact scenario. If we had this type of planning in place when Maverick went in, you wouldn't be trying to take a second bite of the apple there, or even be talking about it, because it would have already been considered and planned for when that development occurred. So if you look at this, there really is a great timing element to this now, that so much of the land around this plan is yet to be developed, and hopefully we could get it right, so to speak.
That's the goal.
So another thing we discussed in the committee was that right hand only at Maverick. Thoughts on that one? If that's something that we want to have right here on South Weaver Drive, right, going into up 2700 East.
That one is also a circumstance of the double left hand forcing the need to reorient the lanes, and there's lots of cookies that I'm mousing.
There is a dedicated right-hand turn lane that's eastbound by Maverick, which is, I think, what you're talking about. If you didn't have that there, then you would then that right-hand lane would be your right-hand turn lane as well, but it would serve as a, dual through and right. And we're also trying to accomplish minimizing the amount of weaving that you do once you get past 2700 and you're trying to get on 89. Since both accesses are on the south side, you have to try to decide, like, well, do I stay in this lane or do I try to hurry up and get in front of this other person? Versus if you had the dedicated lanes, you would be in those lanes and they just take you right, northbound or southbound.
So I know that it was brought up. Was it looked at for basically where the no turn on red is at, doing a yield or a merge onto that? Because in the mornings, that's where our primary traffic is everybody leaving to go to work and trying to get on South Weber.
Right.
Is that good, bad, more dangerous?
Is a no turn on red northbound, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I understand the reason that was put there is because of the site visibility.
Right. I'm not saying that we need to actually deal with that sign. I'm just talking about the reason so many people are upset is because.
I want that to be on the record. Joel said, don't do anything about that sign.
No, I want the sign gone.
Michelle, did you get that?
I'm trying to actually just give it a full road of its own, so everyone turning right would just be able to either merge or
like
yield.
a free right versus actually coming to the
To
intersection.
a complete stop unless it's a yield type thing. I don't know what
Yeah.
they're called.
So, I mean, that's an option, I suppose, maybe.
That would
Yeah,
require.
I think you get back to the
Another
beginning
lane.
issue.
lane.
Yeah.
So
you're suggesting a lane from 2700 East going northbound that is direct by itself, contained, that goes east and then goes southbound onto 89.
you'd also have the weaving issue that Brandon was talking about, because then everybody coming east on South River Drive then has to try to merge into all those people.
But you'd put that weaving on the on-ramp. So it would be its own dedicated lane, basically in a large
Yeah.
U-turn.
2-turn or 3-turn onto southbound.
Am I understanding that correctly? That idea?
Sure. All I'm thinking of, and again, I'm not a traffic guy. All I know is, like, when you get off the freeway on 12th Street, I can stop for the traffic, or if not, I can yield and just keep on turning right onto it, or 24th or any of those kind of things. And that's why I was just kind of wondering if we're looking at being able to get out of there and not have that big backup of cars that we talk about, because very few people are coming in and making a left-hand turn on that. If it could just be a yield type, that then they could, if there's no traffic coming. Because it also looks like from here, the city sign and any obstruction is going to be removed at one point. So,
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
dedicated right, is there? Mhm.
yeah.
Yes.
I think just some considerations is the grading in that area plus land acquisition, which is all doable and we can include it in there, but there's a lot of private land acquisition plus grading that would need to happen to have a dedicated right and merchant.
I don't think the numbers showed that like a dedicated right was required or would be needed.
That's what I was just gonna ask you.
I think there'd be a lot of issues with people wanting to go north as well, with, like you said, the weaving.
So I
There
feel
are
like,
some things you can do with the signal, though, to make it more efficient with a right arrow, green right arrow.
Yeah.
That could help as well, but.
I think the weaving, just curious on your perspective, where we have trucks leaving the gravel pits, they'll be coming from the north, turning east. They'll be required to turn into that north bound lane, but then they'll immediately need to get over and go into the southbound lane. Most of them go south. There's a few who go north, but most of them. Is that going to be problematic if you get a great deal of trucks that are trying to merge over into that lane?
I don't think so, because they'll only be worried about the northbound right, because they'll have their own dedicated signal to turn left. And trucks typically are gonna have to take up both of those lanes anyway,
Okay.
and so they'll kind of come in and they'll take up the road and then choose their lane. And so those northbound rights, typically we'll see them coming, and that'll be the only conflict they'll have to
Okay.
deal with.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of particulars that can be worked out at another time on how this all comes
Right.
together.
I just need to
All we're
know,
after tonight is, do we want to accept this
Right.
plan?
right. Are there any major elements in here that you
So we
want
can-
out or added in?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. No.
No.
Okay, I just have a question on that. So speaking with Blair at the committee, it was just like, well, you can put it, well, we can put this in here and say this is what we're planning to do. Obviously, it's not project specific and it can be changed. Is it a significant amount in impact fees? If we, let's say that we went ahead and just threw it in as is now and been like, yeah, the council in 20 years, 50 years can chop it up all they want. But is it a significant amount in impact fees that might deter development if we are including things in this that we potentially don't actually want, we as a council right now?
Well, keep in mind again that what David said earlier is true, that when people pay impact fees, they're paying globally. So the impact fees that are calculated here would also be paid by, residential as they come in. So everybody who pays an impact fee will pay whatever the new one is, which includes this. Because it's all the added traffic.
I guess what I'm saying is let's say that we approve this plan right here, right now, as is, versus we get rid of all the cement barriers, we take off that dedicated right lane, maybe make some changes to the roundabout or whatever.
Trim it down.
Is that a significant cost enough that those impact fees will vary greatly?
It could be. Yeah, it could be. Adding an additional lane.
I guess that's my hesitation, council's consideration, is I don't want to maximize this and be like, oh yeah, and then we'll deal with it later, because we are passing that cost on to whoever comes to develop. And in the case of commercial, it could be significant enough that they don't come. So I think we should try to get this as close to how we would think we would want it to be, so we get those impact fees relatable, versus just going with this and having a council deal with it later. But I also see the benefit of saying, you have this option, future council, chop it at will.
And I agree with you. The couple things that I would chop if I was chopping would be your cement medians
Thank you, Blair.
and the right turn in front of Maverick.
South River Drive.
But to me, those are the least significant things on the whole proposal, other than maybe dealing with the utilities and stuff there in front of Maverick. To me, that's one of your hardest spots to deal with in this whole thing, is because you got power utilities, you have all of the stuff with Maverick, you have our own stuff. And to me, that gets to be a mess. But so if we were cutting it, those are the only two things I can even see we would cut, other than maybe just the refining of the roundabout or whatever. And so that's why I think we talked, and that my thought was is we just leave those in, because they're fairly, especially the cement median is very probably insignificant on the cost of this whole process.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
it wouldn't be much. I think you do bring up an important point about just kind of good faith decision making and planning, right? That you don't want to just put something out there that really isn't likely or not, people aren't interested in, right? We want to plan what we think is going to be needed and what we're going to pursue. So if there are elements that for sure aren't going to be in it, and at this stage you don't want them, then you'd want to have that discussion. Yes, because as we pointed out earlier, this will be our guiding document as development comes in. I mean, this is what we're going to try to implement. Hence the reason this is before you tonight.
Yeah, so my comments
just piggybacking on what Haley said, it would be nice to, if we had a ballpark number, like are we talking $100 or $1,000 extra for some of these concepts?
It could maybe, I mean, there's a little bit extra work, but we could have them just look at I think the median is somewhat negligible, but that right-hand turn lane in front of Maverick, you know, with and without, and so you could see, it's really hard to put just a number to it out of the air right now. But maybe we could add that in so you could bring that back so you could see what the difference is, if you feel like that's something you want to include or not at that point. This isn't, I mean,
That would be
the
helpful
plan
to
hasn't
have.
been is not being adopted tonight per se, but we need to know if we're moving forward in good faith with this so that when they finish it, right, we're not coming back and redoing again.
No, I think it's good, and I like the general proposal, the ideas, but again, as Haley brought up, we want to know what the impact is, and, you know, the right turn off of South Weaver Drive south onto 2700, you know, we have to acquire property, and also what Joel was talking about, if we had a dedicated right hand over to 89, you know, those are significant costs. It would be helpful to understand that. My other comment kind of was covered, you know, we're paying money to get the sign moved. And this concept is going to say we're going to have to move it again. So I'd just like to understand all of the current development and property and private property that's going to be impacted, you know, if we adopt this as a guideline. I mean, obviously, if it's happening next year, then we don't want to move the sign necessarily. Maybe we still do. But some of these other things, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just want to understand what we're affecting of current stuff.
Right. I think it's safe to say that the right-hand turn, dedicated right-hand turn by Maverick it could be viewed as an independent item because it doesn't have a receiving lane, you know, across the way. You could leave that right-hand lane as you're through and right for now, because it wouldn't be just right there at Maverick. It would be to the west as well, all the way down to their entrance and beyond, so that you're creating a right-hand turn into Maverick and then a right-hand turn at 2700. But I think that could just be widened at some future point in time. Again, I think it could be viewed as an independent item.
Just
Is that
maybe
fair
do
to
a
say,
straw
Paul?
poll of how we feel about that right-hand turn on South Weaver Drive in Maverick.
Well, it seems like, sorry.
I don't like it, but I can't tell you it's not needed in 2050. That's my problem. And I know Quinn brought up the sign, but our sign is, that we're talking about moving for a pretty insignificant amount of money at this point in time. And I don't see us doing this type of a drastic purchase and acquisition and all of that until way down at 2050, but I don't want to have not collected the money for it. That's the decision I came to after going through it.
But wouldn't it be next year if somebody bought the commercial area and wanted to develop it?
Doesn't have to be.
Not the right-hand turn lane. That's what I'm saying. I think that could be a future element that is implemented later.
But the rest of it is.
A lot of the rest of it
The
would be. undeveloped land is
dependent
on
Because it's developed already, so we, and staff and everybody, we decide when that goes. So that could be, I mean, we either live with the traffic issue or we solve it. And that could be done anytime, but that's what I mean, if it has to be done in 2050, I don't want to have not collected the impact fees for it.
Mhm.
In that intersection, I see the cross-section area, so we're trying to separate the eastbound traffic that's going to be turning left.
Not necessarily,
North.
that's just a spacing issue, because the receiving lanes are now, because of the dual lefts going westbound, the receiving lanes for the eastbound traffic are
Can't
now
go straight
moved
into it.
over.
Right.
So,
Lining them up.
yeah, it's just an alignment issue, not necessarily trying to separate.
I think one other way to think about it, instead of collecting money for it, is being able to spend impact fee money for that project. Does that make any sense? So it's the same side of the coin, but we'll be collecting impact fees for the whole transportation utility plan for all of the transportation needs throughout the city. And then as those projects come up on our capital facilities plans, that's when we'll start implementing it. And we won't say, well, this came from this property, so it can only go here, right? That's not how it works. But if it's not
But you won't have the
identified,
money to do it if you don't
right.
have the impact fees at the
So-
proper level.
And then
Right.
at the same token, if it's not included in the plan and we end up needing it, then we wouldn't be able to use impact fees for that project regardless. So we'd be collecting the funds for all the utility plans, but if it's not identified, then we can't use it. Then we have to use our own general fund money to do that.
Right. So what are we looking for here tonight, Dave?
We just need the council to, again, as Brandon asked, or kind of pointed out in the memo, on those kind of decision driver elements. Do you want them in? Do you want them out? Yep.
So we want to move forward with this.
Or
I
are
think
there
we should.
any-
Do we need a motion?
Are we
on-
asking for a motion?
Do we need a
Yes,
motion?
yes.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve WCG concept plan dated 6/23/22 as shown.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
No. Can I just ask a follow-up
Go
question?
ahead.
How long would it take for you to get back the information that we asked as far as impact fee?
The cost
Impact.
differences.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if your gut feel ballpark says it's insignificant, it's gonna be 100 versus, 500, whatever.
I think
But
the
if it's
medians
100
are,
versus 1,000, 10,000, 5,000.
I'm with you, Quinn, and the medians are probably insignificant, but that right lane is probably very significant. And I'm hesitant to just pass it on to future developments.
Yeah, it's more, what's our
it's
urgency to,
not
if we can
needed.
take a month
So-
to get more data to maybe have a better thing going forward. Anyway.
Let me ask you this question. So if it is needed, let's say we decide not to put it in there, just because it changes the impact fees for, I don't know, a regular home 500. I'm just throwing.
Can I just ask, did you mention, I thought we had discussed that it wasn't a huge item, this right turn, this dedicated right turn on South Weaver Drive?
For this area, it would be significant, but for the overall
Like
impact.
functionality of the
Oh, you mean if
intersection will function okay without
Oh.
the dedicated right, or it will not?
I need to go back and check.
I would honestly like to have an answer to that question before I approve it, personally. I just feel like that's a significant cost we may or may not need to pass on to them.
Okay, but I want to hear what Blair has to say because
Yeah,
I think
go
I'm
for it.
going to agree with what he said.
Okay.
Not just because I agree with Blair, but I think we were thinking the same thing.
Now I'm all lost my train of thought, but
I think the big thing is if we need it and we don't plan for it.
if we need it and we don't plan for it,
Right,
the people are still paying for it. This is all coming out of the citizens of the city.
right. And I
And
think
it's a lot easier to come from and pay over time with impact fees than come and saying, we need $2 million from the general fund.
Mhm. And I think maybe we can make a better decision on that if we get the feedback that's been requested here.
Yeah.
Is this really, from a transportation standpoint, a minor or a major issue to have, some of these features in here? So if we can get that, then I think we can come back and say, oh yeah, it makes sense. Yes, it's a 70+% chance that that's really going to be required. Okay, then we move forward with it type thing.
Should we?
So is the sticking point just the right turn lane? Is that,
Not just the right turn.
Well,
lane,
it's just
we've
cost.
got a
I
bunch.
think what they're looking for is cost, so.
We're taking a lot of property with this, and so I'd like to understand.
So we need to give, if they're gonna come
So
back
we-
with saying the right turn lane is gonna cost you X in this, the concrete barriers are gonna cost you X in this, and it, I'll just withdraw my motion. I'll let you guys make your request, because I don't know how you're gonna request it, and I don't know how you're gonna bring you the information back, so.
I don't think it's necessarily a matter of cost, it's just a matter of, is that a need that's 70% need, or is that like a 25%? Or is that like a, hey, you know, it could be bonus, it would be helpful, but it's not necessary. I feel like I would like to know if that's where we're at on that scale, because I'm feeling a little conflicted. I can't tell if that's like, oh, if you don't put that in, you're gonna be screwed, versus, you don't really need it, it would just be helpful.
So you have a
So-
motion and a second, and you want me to
I withdrew the motion.
Blair with your, so Brandon, would it be feasible then if we continue this to another meeting that you could come up with some kind of costs that
Yeah,
they're looking for?
they would, I mean, they're doing the cost anyway, so we could just isolate that element and tell you how much that would be. But we can't tell you the,
They're just asking you for just that. element.
That,
No.
that was my question,
No,
because
it
now they
sounds like
want the
it's-
cost analysis of the whole
The
thing.
whole thing.
And that's not, I don't feel like that's a good use of our city funds today, right now, because we're already paying for this study.
Right, and I don't
I
think anybody's
feel-
actually asking for that. That's not.
But
what I heard.
that's why I asked if it's the right turn, and they're like, no, 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 we need to know
Well,
more of
like
it.
the cost of the circle versus the light. I think that's a huge expense, and the last time I heard, a circle is like $1 million some odd dollars.
Yeah, but in my opinion, smart planning would say a light would be a bad choice right there.
And that may
So,
that may be your opinion on it. What I would like to know is a cost analysis of how much are we actually gaining by doing that? Because if we're putting, you know, that much of a burden on the citizens and the city to be able to come up with that, because we're not talking about 2050. We're talking about if it happens within the next 5 years. You know, maybe they decide they're going to lower the price, they're going to go on and get commercial development in there, and it starts moving in about the same speed that Maverick did. I mean, just quickly come in. I would rather know that what we just gave an okay to makes sense and is cost effective for it. That's all I'm really looking for.
So I guess from my standpoint, and maybe it's a simple answer, you obviously put a bunch of features in here that change the existing. Are all those features added because there's a higher than X% chance that it's required? Or some of them, yes, it would be good, but not necessarily required? You know, if everything that's on here that was added added because it was 75% plus needed at 2050, then to me, the answer's simple. But if there's a big chunk of it, and it sounded like that, Paul, as you were saying that, was, yeah, maybe that's not necessarily required, it's an option, then I'd like to understand those. That's kind of what I'm looking. I don't want a dollar for dollar of everything. I'd just like to know of the features that are different in here that are going to impact something, how many of them are really required versus how many of them are nice.
so more of the traffic numbers and then WCG basically saying the numbers are going to necessitate this, and this.
Right, and obviously the cost, you know, as Joel mentioned, the cost impact on some of the big items would be helpful. But how long does that take? Is that something that you already went through and so you can go back and just pull up the sheet?
Yeah, we have a model built. It's a matter of going in and taking out the right turn lane and telling you what the impacts are,
Okay,
how different it is and how much the delays are. I mean, it will delay those through movements. It just depends on how many right turns are, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many right turns we're talking about. So, I mean, if it's a significant amount, that through traffic will constantly be slowing down and stopping, and it could affect that movement. So it's a matter of just going through our model and updating it.
Is this
So-
something could be done before in time for our next meeting?
Yeah, it's a quick check. I just don't have it with me.
Have you guys started the cost estimates on some of this stuff?
Mhm.
So do you think we could also maybe look at some of those cost of a signal versus a roundabout and then this right-hand turn lane?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that won't take too long either.
Does that sound like that captures what you're after?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, that right-hand turn lane, it's not necessarily about cost for me, is it necessary? I just want to better understand that.
well, if that intersection's already or close to being below what the city goal is, then it might be necessary.
Yeah, I would just love to hear, as you mentioned, not very many are going right, so I would just love to hear.
And we can tell you that in the model when we look at it, what it will do to those through movements. We can tell you what the delay is now and what it will be. Perfect. Right turn lane gone.
Okay.
So Mayor, I move that we continue the WCG concept plan with the further information being brought forward at a future council meeting, hopefully within the next month, identifying the, what we talked, the
Extra.
high versus low priority of the different features that were added, plus cost impacts of some of the different features.
I'll second that.
Cost impacts of some of the larger
Features.
changes, features.
Do we have a motion?
I'll second.
We got a second. We need a roll call or just a unanimous?
It does not have to be roll call.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey,
No,
So Haley, what did you say?
I said aye.
All right, so 3-2. So we'll continue this to another meeting. So if we can get that, it'd be good. Can we put it on our next agenda? For the 24th, is that the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll work together on the 26th.
26th.
We'll get together.
Okay, our next item, ordinance 2022-09,
Thanks, Paul.
Title 4,
thank you.
Chapter 8, noise restrictions. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate your. Okay, we've been working on this for a while. Is there any discussion on this noise ordinance?
All the data confused me more, just so you know. We requested it and it confused me more, so.
You want to walk us through the new data and kind of?
Yeah, so I debated on whether to include the min, max, average, peak in there, and just give you the average, but then I figured that if I just gave you the average, you could ask for all that data, so I did give you all the data. I did go out to various locations between 10 a.m. and noon and in South Weaver. I picked these locations to determine based on the areas that were described in the background chart or background noise chart that was in the packet or in the ordinance itself. I did 5-minute readings and looked at the average. The minimum and the maximum are basically if you take longer than 1 second kind of grouping, that was the maximum time frame. But when we're looking at total, because the ordinance is total sound level, you look at all of the data and you look at the level mark, right? The average mark within that. So that's why the average is included in there. The max is also those max times that are at 1 second. The peak is any instantaneous or quick sounds that were had, like a bird chirp would not be a 1 second long sound. It would be a incidental chirp, and so that's where you get some of those residential areas. That's what you're hearing. But when you're doing noise readings, it's also very interesting because then you have to look at the surrounding situations, right? So you're looking at, in the areas that had lots of grass coverage, particularly like 2100 East Canyon Drive. That was right at the edge of that end of that road, right by an open field that had a lot of crickets that were going. So that bolsters up the average, right? It also had the freeway, which had a consistent noise coming from it there. And then in the residential areas, one is particularly the 1900 East View Drive. That area was a lot of kids trying to see how fast they could go down the hill on a scooter. So you got your sound levels from that. So what we would do in a regular situation, if we had a noise complaint, And typically these aren't going to be so-and-so's playing their drums really loud at night. It's a consistent noise use that's a complaint, right? So if drums are going at night, law enforcement would go and say, hey, stop it, right? But if it's an individual who's operating their carpentry business and have their vacuums and their saws and everything going a consistent time every night, that's when we would go investigate. So we'd go take the sound levels of that, and we'd look at the sound levels on other nights when that's not happening to try to determine what's the difference between the ambient sound, which is the nuisance sound, with the background sound intermixed, and then just what the background sound. So you would go and try to do that. In the code, you would have to record all of the conditions, what the weather is like, what the wind is like, what surrounding noises you're hearing, what possible other locations of noise that could have been contributing to that. So it is kind of a lengthy process to do that. So this is not a scientific study, although if we wanted to do that, we could do that. This was I'm going to show up at a random point on a day that and just see what the daytime levels are. When we're looking at it, the averages aren't too far off of what the background chart is, but I think it's really important to note that in like 98% of the times we would establish a specific area background level when we're investigating a noise complaint versus using that chart. That chart is if it's not possible to do it, we would, and we'd have to document why that's not possible in order for the court to be okay with that. Does that help frame it a little bit?
Can I add just one additional piece of information, and that is this noise ordinance is very detailed. And the reason for that is because if you're going to enforce noise ordinance based on case law and case experience, you have to follow very specific steps, and you have to be able to prove very specific noise levels. And so this covers us as far as that process is concerned. But as Trevor pointed out, in a typical kind of noise nuisance scenario, it's just a call to dispatch and the police come out and say, please keep it down.
Because we have a noise ordinance, right? We use it more as a carrot than a stick. At some times you can use the stick. We have the ability to use the stick, but I mean, we know this for traffic studies. They say 85% of the people just drive the speed limit anyways, or drive how fast they feel safe to anyways, right? So most people will just operate at a normal frequency. I guess no pun intended, or pun intended there. But yeah, so it just provides us the tool to say we have a noise ordinance, you need to keep it down, and people become mindful of that, right? So, but then if we have a persistent use that is causing a nuisance problem, we have the ability to go after that. The due process is a little bit better because we have it's not a criminal offense. It can be prosecuted or pursued as a civil offense. There we go. My brain is losing words. And so yeah.
Makes sense. So basically, there was a resident who lives in a neighborhood area. His neighbor has a very large garage in the back, and he is an auto mechanic, I believe. Works he works during the day, and then he works on the auto mechanic at night. Turns on his music really loud. He's running his saws, all sorts of stuff. It's very, very loud for the next door neighbor, but we weren't ever able to do anything more than call dispatch and beyond that of like, hey, please keep it down, but he wouldn't. This would allow us to be like, okay, this is a consistent complaint and we can enforce it.
Right. And then we have provisions of you have to provide dampening to operate that type of home business, right, in your area. And so because it's a residential zone, here's what your goal is on that chart, and they can put it in some place to do that.
Just a quick follow-up on that example. Would that
at-home business be considered commercial / industrial, or would it be residential if they didn't have if they did have a business license?
It's all based on the zoning. So whatever the zoning of their area is, that's what's
Okay.
determined. So,
Not based on any type of business?
no, if it's not business
Thank you.
license, it's just zoning.
Which was actually helpful because in this case, he claimed that he wasn't doing, it was just for fun. It wasn't for business. So it's helpful that it's based on zoning.
A footnote to that, that would be the underlying zone that would be applied in determining which noise ordinance applies. But if you did get around to civil code enforcement, if he was doing it as a business activity, I think you could impose the higher penalty than what you would if it was an individual actor.
So I guess the question I have is that on table 2, maximum allowable sound levels, will all of this extra work that we're doing with the ambient sound and recording all of these other different measurements, will that change this table? So really, it doesn't matter if you've got all these ambient noises and you've got kids going down the street with a scooter. If you still go over 55 decibels between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., it's still against the noise ordinance.
We need to, the difference is the ambient sound is defined in the ordinance as the source of the nuisance sound. And the background sound is everything but the source of the nuisance sound. So when we identify the background, if there are consistently children playing in the area that cause it to be a 50 or 60 decibel range, then that's the established background because it's without that ambient sound. And that's why it's a little difficult, but we would just have to try to gather that data and make a case. So it's something that's not like, I can't go measure the sound and come back the next day and do it and have it really be a solid reading. I'd probably want to go and more scientifically try to get an average ambient sound during the day, or background sound during the day to measure the ambient sound against it. But if we find the ambient sound is then only 68 decibels and the background sound is 60 decibels, then they're not in violation.
So explain that to me if that was the car wash. So we've got the commercial area right there, and you've got all the noise, you've got all the honking, you got all the freeway, whenever, if they're still producing more than 65 decibels from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., they're still in violation.
You know, you're looking at the chart. You don't go to the chart to start with. You only go to the chart if you can't determine what the surrounding noise is. If it's always 65 over there, 70, whatever it is, that's where your baseline starts, not off that chart. You got to go to the paragraph above the chart. You don't use the chart unless you can't establish a baseline. The chart is only a secondary thing. That's what Trevor keeps saying.
Like 98% of the time, you're not going to use the chart because when it comes down to it, if you go to a court case and say, we didn't establish a background noise because we didn't have time, we just used this chart, then it's like, well, then are they really out of violation? We'll just toss that out, right? They would want to make sure that every effort was trying to gain to get that background, but that just wasn't possible because either the ambient noise was too loud and we couldn't get it, or whatever it is. And so
And it has to be 10 dBA above that baseline.
correct.
So basically, we're saying anything that's near the freeway, if the freeway is the background noise and it's up to 70, it doesn't matter what the zone says or what the ordinance says, everything that's around it is 70 now.
Because at that same token, if there's a constant 70 decibels and I'm producing 70 decibels at my home, then it's the background sound is negating the sound that I'm making. Correct. It's just like if all of your kids are yelling in your house, you can't get mad at one kid because they're yelling at the same level as all the other kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it is frustrating. I understand the frustration of it's like, no, but they're really annoying. Like, but we have to establish a baseline for that. So we either bring down the levels of the whole area through mitigation, or we we established that background noises.
There we go.
Quinn?
I think I understand the purpose of the ordinance and, as Blair indicated and you guys talked about, we ignore table 2 for the majority of the things. It's more for just the chronic or nuisance type things that we go after somebody. I just struggle with throwing out numbers that people are gonna jump on, not understand and read the fine print, and you're gonna have neighbor going against neighbor. He's making too much noise, here's the thing, but we'll just have to educate them.
Okay, somebody like to make a motion?
I may move to approve ordinance 2022-09, Title 4, Chapter 8, noise restrictions.
Seconded.
Okay, we'll start with a roll call vote from Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Our next item, ordinance 2022-10, rezone approximately 7800 south, 2700 east from commercial and agricultural to residential patio. Phil Holliday, would you like to step up to the microphone and give us a little background on this?
Lisa, I did send that concept plan over to you in an email, if you want to pull that up. I apologize that that wasn't in the packet. I must have missed it when I sent everything over.
Phil Holland, not Holiday, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I am Phil Holland with the Holland Company, but I own various land entities, which is the current owners, JF Land Co. So I'm excited to be here. As staff will tell you, it's been a long time coming for me to be in front of you. I own quite a bit of land throughout the Wasatch Front in various segments: residential, multifamily, commercial, industrial. Dan Murray's a friend of mine, and he sold me the land about 1.5 years ago. And I go through an extensive due diligence process when I buy land. First thing I do is I look at zoning, I look at the general plan, and I noticed, and prior to when this general plan was changed, I actually looked at it when it was being proposed as a 24-unit townhome project, which was quite a few years ago. So I looked at it at that point too. So I have some history with this land. I am currently the landowner, and I want to develop it. I have commercial developments, and I don't believe this property is necessarily viable for a great commercial project. And let me tell you 2 reasons. Number one, its location. So off the corner where you have Maverick, that's your A location in my terms. And then you go south of that, and then you have the car wash. That would be your B location. Not as visible as that A corner, but further up. This property is kind of in that transitional point. And I own a lot of these types of different properties because the Wasatch Front, as you know, has a lot of infill land that goes through this wrestle. And by the way, I don't know if you reviewed the Planning Commission minutes, but we went through this wrestle together. And there were some people that spoke in the public hearing. You heard some comments today from public. This property fits in that transitional area where, is it commercial? Does it want to be residential? A couple times it got brought up earlier today, and a couple times it got brought up in Planning Commission, that there could be this other transitional point from the car wash. I believe when this was changed to allow for consideration, I believe that's what your general plan said, with consideration for residential patio. I believe that was done, and you guys know better than me. You were there. And I would love to hear, and we're about to get there. I really want your opinion on that. I think that transition was done. I think the fact that it was designated as residential patio was that concept of, okay, we're transitioning from heavier commercial uses to residential uses that are right next door. So those would be the two main reasons that I don't think it's viable commercially. I think it's off corner enough to where anything that you would get would be probably non-beneficial to the residents. I don't think it's a tax-based generator. I think patio homes is a great transitional use. It's in high demand in our state because we fluctuate, our population, it's getting younger and it's getting older. This is a perfect location for that. Close to transportation, close to burly burgers, close to those things that, you know, you can go to work or you can just take care of your yard. The concept plan's up. And we're not looking at the concept plan, but I wanted to demonstrate what the RP zone would look like right here. These are great lots. They're not, can you see that on your computer?
Yeah.
They're not small lots by any means. In fact, I do a lot of patio home developments, and these lots are substantially larger than other ones that I do. I would designate that maybe these homes would be in the 600,000 range. There's one item I also want to talk about that, and that is this transition between the car wash and this property. I believe, and we've worked this out a little bit with staff, where there is a transitional point between the two uses, and that I would be required to have some sort of a buffer. And I am more than willing, for the sake of the car wash, for the sake of future residents of the development, there will be a masonry fence on that north boundary, my northern boundary, and that's required. A couple other things. One interesting thing, and I was actually going to bring it up before the traffic consultant was here, but this development keeps traffic off of 2700 East. So we kind of talked through that roundabout. This actually still has a feel of a parkway. And I've even come off of that parkway about 5 feet for a landscape strip. And so 20 years down the road, or I shouldn't say down the road, 20 years in the future, because there's a homeowners association that would take care of this masonry fence and that landscape area, most likely it's going to be in pretty good condition. Something the city doesn't have to take care of. And so I think that that's a big positive. And I appreciated the whole dialogue. I sit in a lot of these meetings, as you can imagine, every week. I appreciated where you guys were going with your dialogue, thinking ahead in the future. I would ask, just in closing, that you stay consistent with that general plan. I think a year and a half ago, when it was changed based on what I've seen in those minutes, I think this was designated as that. It could go commercial, it could go residential patio. And I'm here as the landowner requesting residential patio because I think that is a good use for this spot. If you have any questions for me, I would glad to answer.
Question? Of course I do. Just looking at the layout of it, you've got the open space. So after you go down the detention basin, you have one more patio home right there. Is there any reason why that's on the north side instead of on the south side? I'm just looking at where you're going to put the buffer zone, like you mentioned, between Morty's and the homes, because that one looks like that one butts right up to it. Where just a little bit more south where it's labeled open space, you could swap those two out.
Good observation. So, yeah, we had an iteration that designated exactly what you just said. One of the engineering, because we have looked through this engineering wise in our side extensively. One of the items we're going to be dealt with is that 7800 South will have to have some improvements on there. And so there will be stormwater on 7800 South that needs to travel to that detention area. And so I'm still open to the concept of, could you, if we're just talking about this concept plan, could you move 7 to the south potentially and have some sort of an easement there for detention basin? Something that I would definitely say, yeah, that's probably the right thing to do if we could make it work with engineering.
I think one thing to remember in our conversation tonight is that this rezone request is not contingent on this development. This is a concept plan just for an idea of how the property may be used, but by either approving or denying tonight doesn't necessarily approve or deny this concept. If that helps clarify?
Yeah, I understand that. I'm still, one of the major considerations that I have for the rezone is the buffer. And without a buffer, I'm a no. I'll just tell you straight out, because I don't think that's a very good way to treat the citizens that will eventually move there. And as been mentioned before, Morty's, we have no ability to force them on the commercial side to put the buffer where it would normally sit. So that's why I'm asking those kind of questions.
And do you think the masonry wall would help for the sound? You know, the sound that hits the masonry wall and reflects off, or sound that potentially makes it over the wall, would benefit, I believe, the residents, the future residents that would live right there. Plus, I think it would also provide some attenuation, you know, for the residents that live there now. Maybe a little bit less noise, perhaps.
I got a couple of questions, if that's okay. First, back to staff. I know when Morty's came in and proposed car wash, they had the concept of storage units as a buffer, and he owned the land, and that was kind of the selling point that helped us approve his. That was never anything more than just an idea. Is that correct? There was nothing that was guaranteed. Correct. Okay. Second question, Mr. Holland, you know, our preferred is commercial per our general plan. And as you identified, you have an A, you have a B, C zone. Have you tried to get commercial in there as a B or as any other?
Yeah, good question. I work with quite a few tenants that most of them you'd probably know. And so, yeah, I've put this site in front of them, including after planning commission, they had a 2-2 vote, and one planning commissioner actually left, which was like, oh no, I think he had an emergency. But after that, I thought, oh no, I didn't see this going this way whatsoever. And so I started to put feelers out. And the problem is, I think the problem back in 2001, when I worked on the 2 Walmarts that are north and south of you, is that they wanted to be centralized to population bases that were easily accessible. And South Weber, we all love it for different reasons, but one of them is not to shop here. So most people go elsewhere. Your population, I don't think could ever. And I mean, this is back in 2001. So yeah, I think when I hit the market and said, okay, I potentially have this site, would you come here? These are known users. And they said, absolutely not. Population isn't big enough for it. And you have other nodes that are right next to it that are easier and more accessible. And so I'm not saying anything that you guys haven't kind of experienced before, but that's the issue I've got.
So you're saying the 2001. So you haven't done anything recently
Yeah,
since
no,
Maverick's been there.
Sorry, I jumped around there on you. It's the same that I experienced in '01, which is we would rather go in those more populous areas that are more accessible to kind of regional shopping than to go on that point right there. So yeah, I did reach out to a handful that I already work with. Walmart wasn't one of them, by the way.
Right. It wouldn't fit in there unless there's a mini mart. But my next comment, maybe go back to staff. I appreciate you pulling up the concept plan because that would have helped get a few more ideas and things. But my first concern as I look at that is you now have a road coming on to 7800 that is one house away from a major road. And I know the US government, federal, we can't attach to interstates and highways without a certain distance because you don't have enough time to stop and turn in or turn out with it being a safety problem. Do we have anything in our code that controls how close we can have intersections?
Nothing in the code, no specific number in the code.
Because that would be a real concern for me. As you're trying to get cars in and out, somebody turns in and that's going to turn in, somebody's coming behind them, is going to rear end them. Somebody's trying to come out. They don't have enough room to go out to turn left.
Right.
To get there. They're pulling a trailer or whatever. They can't get out on the road far enough to get there. So
There's definitely some trade-offs with this because a road coming out onto 7800 eliminates any access onto 2700, which is a good thing. But yes, the proximity to the intersection could be a concern. Something that may make that less of a concern is just the number of people that live in here, and the traffic count coming off of. I think the concept plan had, is it 10, 11? 11. Is relatively low. And that doesn't mean there couldn't still be some potential, and we would still want to make sure that we try to get that away from the intersection as far as possible.
In other concept plans, the road out was more at the orientation of 9 and 11 with that home. The other issue is that there's at a street kind of kitty corner to where that would come out, and so then we would have other issues of two conflicting intersections that don't match up, right? So it was like what's the best of.
yeah, it's a congested area.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's important to point out that we don't necessarily have anything in code that requires the road to be shown the way it is, right?
Right,
The
yeah.
rezone, again, is just the rezone. So they could reconfigure potentially, not that you would, but that, again, what you see before you isn't necessarily what would come. And so we don't have anything that requires the road not to connect to 2700. We're saying that it's not because that's what we're seeing in front of us. But
Yeah, it was more a general question of what
Congestion.
limitations would be in any type of residential connecting in there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still a concern.
And I guess back to kind of that same argument is, if this was a rezone, do we have a map that shows what the current zoning is and how much commercial we're losing on this? I mean, I appreciate what you've done. I mean, I think that's beautiful adding the map on there so that the plat, so we can see kind of potentially what's up there. But if this is a rezone, I would expect to see a map that shows our current zone of commercial and where that's going to be and how much that's going to be.
I just asked Lisa to pull that up.
Okay.
it's 2.9 acres. The Davis County parcel map shows it as 2.9 acres.
That's not all commercial.
Yeah. Yeah, what it's currently zoned versus what the projected land use general plan says.
So while she's pulling that up, I mean, and I didn't go back and get into all the particulars of the general plan. But as Quinn mentioned, I mean, our preferred zoning is commercial. And for me, it is, I mean, my recollection of why that cloud on there, which I don't love the cloud, as was mentioned in planning commission, that others don't love the cloud on there either because it creates this gray area. But we were looking at a current proposal which had some of that in it. There were some people on the council who liked that concept. And that's what my recollection is why the cloud went on there. I did not like that cloud going on there, nor did I ever like that being residential patio. So I struggle a lot with changing that from commercial highway. And because that's what our underlying zone is, and across the street is commercial highway, almost mirroring this property. And I mean, there's things we could disagree and agree on as far as, I think you gave a very good presentation, but it's very visible from the highway. One day that could possibly be commercial. Commercials, there's not a lot of spots for people to go. There's not many more Riverdales in this world. So ground is, I mean, it eventually will be something, as you said the other night. It'll eventually be something, and you will turn it into something. But I struggle with that being residential patio all the way down to Morty's, and I wouldn't agree with it.
So I just have a couple of things and a couple of things I wanted to address. Just question for staff. I asked if we could have that program called Aon.
Yeah, Aon
run. Was staff able to put something together for us there?
Yeah, so I have some numbers. So looking at it, if according to this, there is, I mean, if it was 25% residential patio, which was the concept of having the frontage of 7,800 be residential patio and the rear being commercial, then there is I want to be very cautious. There's a potential of getting $13,000 in property tax from that area. Now that's all contingent on the finished project that is in that commercial zone. So if it's storage units versus a high-end medical clinic, those are going to produce different amounts of property tax for us to collect. The benefit of commercial is that we get 100% of that property tax in. What I would foresee, just in my professional opinion, is that we probably would not receive retail in that area, and so a sales tax incentive would be low for us to gain money, because it most likely would go to professional services. Looking at the kind of the transitional items. I mean, I could be surprised and we could get a retail component in there, but retail is not super prevalent in the area, and typically they go to higher traffic areas for retail. So
what's the time frame of that 13,000 you said?
13,000 would be over a 10 to 15 year time span to collect the full amount at build out.
And that would be on the commercial side or the residential side?
That would be total with commercial and residential.
Commercial and residential.
A residential,
commercial, non-retail.
Right.
correct. It's impossible to guess the sales tax revenue from it.
That's
no
great.
idea.
I just,
With the residential patio component in that area, we'd be looking at around 5,727 is what this has at build out, which would be a much shorter time span of 2 years.
okay. So I want to address a couple comments that I've had and some questions that have come up. Real quick, Paul, the public hearing, it requires, Jamie, let me know if I get this wrong, but we do require a public hearing and it happened at planning commission. So that's why it doesn't need to happen again at council. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So some of the comments that we've been getting as far as commercial, it's kind of been a little bit of both. I've gotten, people who want to have more sales tax commercial and people who want to have, just a medical office. Trevor kind of alluded to it, but there really is no way for us to zone for that. Commercial is commercial and we get what we get. You can put it as commercial and you might get a doctor's office and you might get a soda shop and you might get, there's no way for us to kind of control that. So just something for those who are listening to consider. It's not something that is within our realm to control. So the cloud, I actually have some thoughts, and I know that you sent the link for the original meeting, and I didn't get a chance to go listen to it. So perhaps if you did, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the way I remember this happening is we wanted to have, exactly as you just stated, the residential fronting 7,800 to act as a buffer. We had gotten a plan that was for R7. And we didn't want any more R7 there, so we wanted it to be at a residential patio to kind of lower the density. But why it went to a cloud formation, I wasn't sure. I thought we were kind of splitting it so that, let's say, I guess the southern portion would be residential for patio and then commercial to act as a buffer. I remember that being important just because of the road. And let me know if I got this correctly. If we put commercial clear across the entire parcel, the road 7,800 acts as the buffer. So there isn't any additional requirements for commercial to buffer for the home just directly across the street or otherwise,
No,
right?
not across the street, but the surrounding residential properties, they would have to provide a buffer, yes.
So that's how I remember that coming through. But I agree, it was slated for commercial. And it's difficult because we are a small city. And so we struggle. We have a very small pocketbook that we have to work with. And so it's always hard to come to decisions where you're going to eliminate the very little commercial property we have. It's hard, and I'm just going to be really honest with you, it's hard to go straight value at it's not a viable place because I've only been in South River for 10 years. But this entire 10 years, I've heard that. Well, we will never get a Maverick. We will never have, it will never, they go to Layton, they go to South Ogden, we will never have it. And now we have our Maverick, which is a huge success. And Burley Burger, which was, by all accounts was doomed to fail. I'm not trying to discredit that's what's out there, but it is just kind of hard to hear it and be like, yep, we keep hearing that, but it still happens. We have another fairly large development coming in further down the road than where you're at that's bringing in commercial and has some high level of interest over here. So I struggle with that. It's a hard concept for me to know to give up the commercial that we have where it is so limited and exchange it for some more residential. I do like the patio home, frankly. I like it. I think it's a great development. It looks very nice. It's so hard to give up that commercial spot for me. So that's where I'm at.
Angie?
My turn. Okay. I pretty much just echo what Councilwoman Albert said. It is hard to hear it's not viable because maybe it's not viable right now. And maybe it is, like Blair said, that's high visibility right there. Everybody can see that. And as we discussed, as 2700 East on the east side of that develops, that would be even more desirable for commercial depending on what type of tenants go in right there. So that would increase the potential for commercial there. So I have a really hard time. If it were to me right now, to rezone this right now to patio, I would say no. I don't want to give up our commercial. Also, the lights from the car wash are so bright. They are so bright. I can see them from my house so well. And so to put patio homes right there, even with an 8-foot masonry wall, you're still going to see that. And that's a real detriment to somebody who's living right next door to that.
I was just going to follow up on the cloud. And again, I don't remember all the details either. I went back and looked at some of the discussion, but Blair, maybe you can remember. As has been discussed, that area is all commercial, but there needs to be some transition because we can't have commercial with bright lights, right, all the way up to 7800 South. And so it may have been that the little cloud was saying, we want commercial, but there could be transition into some potential residential patio as you transition up, not necessarily the whole thing becoming residential patio. We have another cloud on the west end of the city that is in a similar situation where as you gradually get closer to the commercial area, you can have a lot of real good commercial, but as you get to the residential area, we don't want commercial all the way up there. And so I'm wondering if that's kind of more what the intent or option was there. I don't know if anybody else remembers specifically how it went there, but that's kind of what I would envision there, is something that would transition in, not necessarily take it all the way right up next to the commercial.
Any other discussion? I think everybody's had a turn.
Just maybe if I'm making a comment, because I'm
Okay.
hearing you out loud and this is detrimental to me. So I've got a question rolling around in my head that, we don't want to get rid of commercial. I use the word that I used, which, yeah, probably is unfair, but because of its location, if I were on South Weber Drive and I were trying to rezone something to patio homes, yeah, I would stop and pause and say, now hold on a second. So I guess when I say by non-viable is actually its location within South Weber. So not necessarily South Weber in general, but its location is non-viable. And so it almost has two black eyes. So number one, the population is not increasing substantially enough in South Weber, as in other areas, to beget commercial development. I live in a community that's very similar. We like commercial development, but we'd rather have it in other cities next to us. And so I'm perplexed. I don't know. I'm trying to kind of sift through, yeah, okay, 10 years, it's still not going to be viable because it's off South Weber Drive. It's not good commercial and probably never will be unless, so if you were a dentist, for example, and you were to say, I'm going to do a 5,000 square foot office right there, and I'm going to do my dental practice there. His population would have to declare that, yeah, you're going to draw from that entire area. And in 10 years, your population's not going, and I don't know the studies, maybe staff already does. But in 10 years from now, your population is not going to double. And so I'm trying to read through this, and as an applicant, what do? Because I'm in a transitional point too. If I say, okay, well, maybe we could do some light industrial or some commercial and residential, is that something? And I don't want you to be in a position where you're trying, but I need guidance because I own land that, in my professional opinion, is not viable commercial today, nor is it viable in 10 years. So does that mean to me that I have to come back every year and say, we still have this patio home designation and just wait for the council to transition? I don't want to do that. I want something that works for all of us.
But wasn't the land commercial highway when you bought it? So I'm just saying that if you knew exactly.
Some of it was, but if you even look at the commercial highway, there is so much land available in South Weber right now that's commercial highway. I looked at the piece across the street to my east 10 years ago, which was for sale.
But I'm saying you bought it knowing it was commercial highway. So was your intent when you bought it to switch it over, or was it you were going to try to work and see what was commercially viable? Because right now it sounds like your method of figuring it out is pretty much a quick A, B, C, and you would have known A, B, and C when you bought it.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be confrontational with you. I'm trying to gain Like, what do I do? Do I stick with a commercial highway use and say, okay, this is a car dealership? That's a conditional use that I could probably get a used car dealership there with larger lights. I think I'm too close to residential to make that work. I think if I were to come back and apply for that, we'd be saying the same thing. So this is one of those that it's unique. And so I don't want you to give up the ghost on what I'm proposing just by saying we don't want to give up commercial, because I just don't think that's
I
good
don't,
enough.
I don't think we were all saying we are opposed to a different, I won't approve it without a concept. I can't believe that it even you weren't told that. That's been a big issue with us as council. I wouldn't have approved this rezone without a full concept. Anyway, so that was right off the bat. Trevor, whether you agree with that or not, that doesn't matter. I would have said no.
Well, can I speak to that? As a city, if a landowner requests
I
a rezone
understand that,
request,
but
we
you
have
could have
to
advised him of that as well, because we've said that.
the landowner requests a rezone prior to. It was not a staff driven. It was a landowner. Can I get it before the council and ask about the rezone before I get further down the process? And as a city, we have to allow for a landowner to do that.
I understand that, but I don't know that he was aware of how strong, especially to change to residential patio or to a total different use. We've been burnt too many times with that. Because you can change this, like you said, these are big lots shown. The patio home requires something totally different. The setbacks and everything are different than your concept. You can bring something back totally different that meets that zoning and say, tough, it meets your zoning. And so, and I'm not trying to be confrontational with you, but I don't think we've shut you down, because we're saying we see it as a buffer thing. The reason in my mind that cloud is there is because we were reviewing a proposal from Dan Murray at the time that had some transitional on that property. There were people on the council that voiced residential patio, and I will. Wayne said he liked residential patio instead of the high density R7 that was up there. It carried a lot of weight. It put a cloud back on there, is the way I understand that all went. And so I did not agree with residential patio being on that property. But you bought a piece of property that was commercial highway. That's like me going into the industrial park and buying a piece of property as industrial and then trying to get it rezoned because I can't get a tenant on that building. That's my issue as the landowner.
So I agree with you. And this is why I'm glad we're having this dialogue, because I'm trapped. I bought it a lot based on the general plan
But it was
designation.
just to consider.
Well, sure.
It wasn't zoned.
But here we are. We're trying to consider this. And yeah, I think if it comes down to, well, we just want commercial there, then yeah, I've got to just come back and say, okay, well, you've got it. I'm going to find some commercial and I'm going to put it right there. So I mean, I could do that too. I don't think it's a good for any of us. So I don't know, maybe we're going in circles a little bit, but what I appreciate is the open dialogue, because a lot of times this doesn't happen between somebody in my shoes and somebody in your shoes. So I appreciate it. And I don't look at it as confrontational. We need to have these crucial conversations, especially in zoning. So if it's maybe I'm feeling undertones of, yeah, no, we don't like the patio, or no, we're not going to rezone it, then I would take away my application and I would probably come back with you with something else showing you, okay, what about this? And maybe that's what we've got to do. By the way, I'm totally okay with that. Is that something, if I'm requesting that you give me a little guidance on this, is that something that's okay from your standpoint?
I'm not giving
What do you
any
mean?
guidance, because anytime I've done that, it's burned me. So as a property owner, you figure out what steps you have to take to get whatever you need done.
So let me ask this. Now, I don't know where any of you are at, but staff or Jamie,
Jamie.
if they denied me, I know state legislation gives me 1 year that I could apply. Most cities are pretty consistent with that. But what if I, in a week or two, change my application to say, well, I'm requesting patio plus commercial or plus light industrial? Does that constitute? Have you guys been in that? I've been in that very same thing. And if the application adjusts slightly, then I don't have to wait a year and I can reapply. Maybe I've caught you off guard. This is important. These are the reasons I'm asking.
The statutory provision exists to prevent a council from being burdened by constant repeat applications. I think it would be up to the council whether they would like to consider it. Keep in mind that it couldn't come back in a week or in 2 weeks,
Right.
because it would have to be renoticed, reheard, and all of that. It would be a different rezone request. So I think we would have to visit with the council and see what the city's appetite is to undertake that, but we
Okay.
can think about it.
Any other comments before I revoke my application?
I'll just add one. South Weber is our own little community, but we are connected by a fine line to the surrounding communities. And so we've had people do grocery store studies in our city, and we've begged and asked them to look beyond our city, because there are a lot of people who come through our city. This Maverick out here was the #1 Maverick in the US or the state, maybe the state at one point, not because of South Weaver residents, but because of everybody coming through.
For sure.
And a lot of people came to the Maverick and then saw Burley Burger and then saw other things. And so now we have people that consistently come to our commercial because they were drawn here. And so as I look at this general plan map, and we've got the property on the east side, I know you say you don't feel like it would be viable even 10 years from now. If that property east of 2700 suddenly was filled up with commercial, that people were coming in, then maybe the property you own now has some life commercial. Now, that's not going to happen next year, maybe, but I think if you look at South Weber only as an entity, yeah, it probably doesn't make sense. But if you look at South Weber as a place where people are driving by, thousands and thousands of cars every day, going to and from wherever they're going, and they know there's something here, they stop off for gas right now and a drink and whatever and lunch. If they see something else there, they'll make it a destination. That's my thought.
Yeah, Quinn, I think those are good thoughts. Those are thoughts that I had similarly. I'm also with Angie. You saw all of us hesitate the second you say that, because we get burned when we promise something before it's brought into us. But I mean, if you bring forth an application, you have that right for us to review. It's half patio and half commercial. I can't tell you how that will go. I'm only one of 5. But I think that Quinn brings up a good point in that property to the east. You mentioned that it's not off South Weber Drive, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's commercial coming in far down South Weber Drive past the charter school.
South Weber Drive is a great commercial node for
but
sure.
not for those cars that Quinn just pointed out. So I'm having a hard time being like, oh, it's a half a block off South Weber Drive, but those that are a mile down South Weber Drive are going to do excellent. Like that kind of doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, again, it's just the more that we give up our commercial, the more that cost falls to our residents' backs. And I have a hard time giving it up.
The only thing I want to say is that I've heard that you're very good at what you do. And I would request that you look at this almost as a challenge. Because, yeah, I don't want to give up the commercial. And I think that South Weaver Drive isn't our only road that's going to be very busy. And there are configurations that you could do that doesn't hide the commercial in a back corner. And I would just propose that you kind of look at that and try to figure out, okay, I understand what South Weaver is, and I consider it more than just another lot of land. And what can I do to actually make this work for everyone? And I think that's honestly your best course of action. That's it.
Thanks for your feedback.
I think you kind of heard also here tonight that, we're looking for a buffer, and the south end, we've got to transition into that residential. So perhaps if you came back with some commercial on the north end, and then off 7800, you transitioned into some residential patio homes, that might be an option. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much. So just for the purpose of revoking my application, because, yeah, I don't want to be denied. I want us to work through this. And I don't know what that means, honestly. But yeah, I'd like to revoke my application for rezone.
Can he do that right now?
Yeah, he can. As the applicant, he can revoke it.
And I don't think we'd make you wait a year anyway.
No.
so.
Well, then, hey, do I have? Why don't we just go ahead and do this?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for allowing me to be open with you, and this is part of my process as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we need any other action on that? If he's revoked it, that's it?
That's it.
Reports. New business. We'll cover. Anyone have some new business? I know.
Yeah, I do. Just 2 items.
Yeah.
I was just wondering on the 9/11, what did she call that? I want to say freedom. No, that Jeannie Taylor came.
Memorial.
The memorial, thank you. Did we figure out what exhibits we're going to be doing for that?
I have not had further communication with her.
Okay, I think that she was hoping we could get something to her by August. Do you need help? I know that she gave you were her point of contact, but do you, does staff have that?
If you have
or
ideas, I'd be happy to listen.
do we need to talk about it as a council, or how do we make sure that we get something in there? I guess is what I'm asking.
Is that a PR discussion?
Could be. We need a PR meeting, Trevor. I asked you last time.
Yep.
Okay. Is that what we want to do? Give it to PR?
Well,
Does
we
anybody
definitely-
have any
We
thoughts?
definitely need to do something.
I agree. We need to do something.
Okay. So I guess if you have any ideas or thoughts, please let Angie or I know, and we'll, the mayor, discuss it. And then my other item was, I know Angie and I have both brought this up, just school traffic, speaking with both schools, South Weaver Elementary and Highmark, regarding their traffic flow. With school being out, I feel it's probably an ideal time to be able to sit down with them. And Blair, I wasn't sure what your answer, do you want to go in as public safety, or do you not want to meet with them at all? Or what was your?
I don't even remember being asked the question.
I asked
I said I was happy to go either way. I didn't want it to be, we talked about it, we don't want to walk in there as this great big overbearing thing, but I'm happy to go if I'm needed to go.
Would you like staff to reach out to schedule a?
Yeah, I
communication
feel
with
like,
both
so
schools?
you had a conversation with Highmark, correct?
Mhm.
Did you with South Weaver Elementary? I know I sent some concerns that the residents over there have forwarded on to me.
We
Was
haven't
that-
had a specific meeting with South Weaver
Okay.
Elementary, no.
Okay,
I
You
think
want-
it needs to happen, but I don't care if it's a PR thing. I don't care if it's a public safety committee thing either.
do you care if a council is there, or do you want to just give it to staff, I guess?
I think at least one council member should be there.
I think 2 should be there.
Okay.
Will you get
So
it,
moved.
get it done for Blair and
So
I
moved.
to be able to be there and discuss with them?
If the
Some ideas.
mayor wants to go,
And the mayor, yes, please.
so we're gonna bring her.
We're gonna, yeah. Yeah, that-
I'll sit in the
And do
corner.
you want to meet with Highmark as well then? Or are you saying the staff meeting with Highmark suffices? You want to meet with both schools with?
Well, Highmark
Council
basically
representation.
just said there was nothing more they could do. Is that correct?
We had specific conversation about how the Gateway project and the development of that neighboring property would affect them. That was what it was about. It wasn't about their general traffic plan or
Okay.
anything like that.
Yeah, I would like to sit down with them too. If nothing else, then just to better understand why it is set up the way it is, because we will be getting, as a council, a lot of feedback regarding that when Gateway comes in.
Okay, we'll set up a meeting.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business? Joel?
I just wanted to bring up, on the July 4th parade, we all heard what happened in the other city. And I've seen since then a number of other cities kind of address the issue, and I don't know whether they set it up through policy. Some of them had to change it in code. But do we want to, is there any appetite to look at maybe putting in some type of regulations or requirements? Most of the other cities, for example, are making an age limit so that children of a certain age can't be on the moving floats. It doesn't matter if you're on the ground, it's just on the moving float, and then some of the different protections. One of them even mentioned that they have an age limit for throwing out the candy because the older kids can get it quite a bit further, where the young ones actually get it very close to the vehicle, and then as the kids from the outside are running in, they come very, very close to the vehicle. So I didn't know if that was anything that anyone had any appetite to look at or what. So I just
Dave and
thought-
I discussed that, and Dave was gonna reach out to
Yeah, I had conversation with Tawny specifically about Country Fair Days plans for the upcoming parade, and they have looked at what Farmington published and what their updated and amended rules are, and they're looking to do something very similar.
Okay.
I think we're in a little bit of a unique spot, and maybe Jamie can provide some advice on this, where, as you described, the city council essentially legislating how we operate parades versus Country Fair Days is a separate and distinct entity that's operating the parade. Although we are involved as a city in getting the parade permit. So there's some overlap there, and I can work with Jamie maybe on the specifics of whether the city has to create those rules or whether Country Fair Days should create those rules. But Tony and I had a very good conversation about the various types of amended rules as you described and as other cities have published. So they're very aware of that. They're concerned. We do not want to put anybody in harm's way. And there are specific things that have led to not only that tragedy, but other tragedies. I also spoke with Jamie Cox, Lieutenant Cox, about her public safety experience, and she's been on a number of those types of calls and described some of the various circumstances that led to those. And so Country Fair Days is addressing exactly what she described already. But Jamie, what are your thoughts? Do we need to do something as a city or leave that to Country Fair Days?
Well, I think the only question you need to consider is whether you want the restrictions to have the force of law and whether you want them to be durable year to year. Those are the two things you would gain by having the city take action and then requiring that as a condition of their permit. If you don't have that concern, you think that they'll put in the necessary safety things just as a matter of policy for that particular event, then you could trust that occurs and leave that be in place.
So with that, how would you like us to proceed?
Tough question. Go ahead.
I don't have any desire to put the force of law behind it, frankly.
That was my thought as well. I think it'd be nice to just have it be part of the policy expectation with that and any other activity, because you don't know what you may be also affecting every time you create a law for one specific thing.
Agreed.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Leave it up
That committee
South
to the
Weaver
South
Day
Weaver
Committee.
Day.
Country Fair Days will
Country
take
Fair
care
Days.
of it, but they were very open to our
Yeah.
opinion as a
I think
city.
they're